Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, and welcome to our panel dedicated to the discussions on the war in Ukraine, of course. The European security and migration challenges, a very hot topic, and I'm extremely happy to have this discussion with our very, very distinguished guests that I will introduce in a moment. It is a moment of war in Europe, and it is a moment when Russia's invasion in Ukraine has changed Europe's security order basically for generations to come. We've broken taboos. The EU has decided to supply weapons to Ukraine through the European Peace Facility. Member states have increased their expenditure and their budgets, and they reached historic levels on defense. And we have Finland and Sweden prepared basically to join NATO. This war has also proved liberals right when we've been long advocating for a European defense union and to scrap, of course, qualified voting majority in foreign and security matters. Now, these EU groundbreaking decisions have, of course, and need, of course, action. And we need strategic change within the European institutional framework. How can the EU take a major step towards its common and security defense policy? As NATO is set up to adopt a new strategic concept at its June 2022 summit, how do we design the EU's defense in a way that complements NATO? Will the Ukrainian refugee inflow finally lead to a common EU approach to migration? How has the EU response affected the situation on the ground in Ukraine and in Moldova? All of these things will be discussed, as I said, with my very, very distinguished guests today. Allow me to introduce them in the order that I have on my piece of paper, with due apologies. But I will, however, start with Guri Melby, which is a party leader of Venstre, Norway. Am I pronouncing it right?
Yes.
Frédéric Bernard, who's the head of cabinet of the president of the European Council, Charles Michel. Kalle, Laanet, Minister of Defense, Estonia. Michal, Kobosko, First Vice President of Polska 2020, Poland. And Benedetto, Della, Vedova, Foreign Affairs Undersecretary of State in Italy. And I should have introduced our dear Commissioner Šefčovič, then his plane was cancelled. I was less stressed about the debate, and then I found out that we have an Italian colleague joining, and I became actually more stressed because the major challenge of the panel is to answer in 3-4 minutes. Each reply has to have 3-4 minutes, and this is something that it's quite a provocation. I have a first question to all of you, as a matter of fact. It has often been said that the war in Ukraine constitutes a watershed moment in the history of Europe and the European integration. What, in your opinion, will be the long-term impact of war on Europe? 3 minutes question. And we can start in this order, please, Guri.
Thank you. And it's, of course, a big question. What is the impact of the war in Ukraine for Europe? Well, I think it can be many things, and it's in many ways also up to us to make sure what this impact actually is. In the short term, this is, of course, very negative for Europe. We see many crises coming after this conflict, like energy crisis, increasing prices on many sectors, and of course also then increasing social inequality in many countries. And I think this will be a very difficult period in many European countries. We will have to have more budget discipline. We have to make sure that we try to reduce the difficulties after this crisis. But in the long term, it's also possible to gain something good out of this. And I think that we already see that Europe is getting more united in this crisis. we see that in many countries, there's nothing uniting countries as much as one common enemy. And even though I think we all like that this enemy wasn't there, I think it shows for many what direction European countries have to go in towards more democracy, more freedom for the individual, and that it's the complete opposite of what Putin represents. And I think the role that the EU has taken so far in this conflict has been a very good role, and it has shown leadership going forward, being both fast and also very strong when it comes to sanctions. Many EU countries, also countries outside the EU, like Norway, has changed their policy in a very short amount of time. You mentioned Sweden and Finland and NATO. Yesterday, Denmark had a referendum about joining the defense policy in the EU. So there's a shift going on in many countries in a direction towards more integration. And I think in the long run that will be something positive, but it's our job to make sure that that is what happens after this crisis. And this can make us more resilient towards dictators, towards countries that makes the world more insecure as it is today. But it's not something that comes easy. We have to work for it in every country and in the EU.
This is war.
Yeah. I think that was a good punch for my...
Thank you. Thank you very much. Michal.
4 minutes, you said. It's a challenge,
Yeah.
I must say, because it's a huge challenge to address. I think we are already just now starting to realize the implications and the outcome and the next steps that should be taken, because this is an unprecedented situation that we are facing right now. And we just learning what to do and planning what to do in the next phase. First thing is pretty obvious. This is the first time when we started to realize that the regular war in Europe is not unthinkable. Until now, until February 2022, we thought, okay, there were different scenarios, but he wouldn't make it. Yes, he did make it. He did start a war. It was against the logics, against any sense, economic or political sense, but he started the war, and we need to face a completely different situation. So we need to realize that there will be no business as usual with Russia, with the Russian Federation. Not today, not tomorrow, and probably not in the long run from now, because it's not the Russia that we were hoping to see. That we were hoping to see a country that is transforming itself, that's kind of changing and getting closer and closer to what we call a democratic model. There is no, and there will be no democratic model for Russia under this regime, and unfortunately, perhaps under next regimes as well. When you look at the support that the Russian population is offering to Vladimir Putin, you see that something is wrong, and this will not change overnight. So this is already 100 days since the war started, and this is not the start, actually, because the war started in 2014. We must remember this. This is the second phase of the war. After 2014, Russia captured the territory of Ukraine, which was equal to the territory of the Netherlands. Right now, Russia is capturing 20% of the Ukrainian territory. This is Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg combined. This is the reality today. So we cannot start discussing, the compromise with Russia, talking about, that we should avoid humiliating the Russians or Putin himself. How can you humiliate somebody who's killing your wife or who's raping your child? There is no compromise with that kind of behavior. We cannot just accept and go on starting, talking to Putin and treating him as a partner. He's an aggressor, and we need to realize that his aggression that took place in the case of Ukraine. He might go elsewhere as well. He might go to the Baltic states, to Georgia, to Moldova, as we are very aware, but also Poland, Romania, Bulgaria, and other countries. That's his thinking. The late Madeleine Albright was very right when she was warning all of us that the fascism is there. the fascism is alive in Europe. It may have different faces, different forms, different shapes, but the fascism is there, and we need to be aware, and we need to get ready to fight against fascists in Europe. There are lots of other implications. Let me just mention one more. This war is showing all of us that the values, European values, really matter. Yes, they do matter. Before the war, we were, talking and repeating their European values, rule of law, and so on. That was purely a theory, because we are discussing a very theoretical situation where somebody would, go into aggression against all of us. Now it's not theory any longer. We have to face the reality that this is what really matters. The rule of law, the human rights protection, the minority protection, the freedom of speech and freedom of media, this is what differs us from the other side. And we have to protect it among our own community. We have to protect it and to look at members of the European Union are doing. I'm not mentioning specific countries, specific member states, but we obviously know, no war here, please. I'm talking about Hungary, I'm talking about Poland, and the other countries which might have similar autocratic tendencies. We need to be aware of that. We cannot let it go. We cannot let it continue, because our community is as strong as our weakest member. So we have to remember about this when we think about Ukraine. Final thing from my side, we will be stronger when we will be bigger, the European Union. So we cannot just keep talking about the enlargement and expansion of the Union. We need to put it into facts, into action. We have countries like Moldova and Georgia which are waiting. We have countries of the Western Balkans, and we cannot just keep them waiting. We have to act, because there is no gray zone in Europe nowadays. Gray is not the color of the season. We need them inside of our union, as we need to open the way for our Ukrainian friends, to let them see that there is clearly a way and a road to the accession to the European Union. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Michal, Kalle.
My turn.
Thank you. Thank you.
It was a so good argumentation that probably I don't need to say anything. I agree with everything. Or would you like something to hear more?
I would add something about the refugees,
okay,
but that's your turn now, sir.
Okay, my turn. Yes, maybe I just use the word unity. At first, Putin started to test European Western unity already last summer, when started hybrid attacks against Lithuanian borders from Belarus, Polish borders, Latvian borders, and we kept that unity. Of course, we helped each other, and this is the most important thing. Secondly, Estonia doesn't change any political directions, because we know very well for what is Putin and Russia ready to do. They are prepared to influence the neighboring countries. If we are remembering what said Putin when he started as a president of a Russian Federation, I would like to enlarge influence of our Russian Empire. And he is doing that. And we are hoping that these are just words. We are calling to him, we are trying to talk to him. There is no consequences, we know that. And we know that Putin accepts only power. Only power. And that was the reason why Estonia decided already in December last year to help Ukraine with the heavy weapons. Second thing, when, of course, 24th of February 2022 changed totally world. World never became like it was before that. And again, we are coming back to word unity. How unified are Western countries? What is the unity of the different single states in European Union, of course, in NATO alliance? We know that Russia would like to influence to our internal political life. That happened in Lithuania, that happened in Latvia, and right now it's happening in Estonia. We have right now a governmental crisis in Estonia. This morning when I landed here in Dublin, I received a message that the Prime Minister went to our President with 7 applications to left from the government, our partners in coalition. Because these times when we are so turbulent security situation all over the world, we are playing political games internally. It can't be this way. And all this is coming from East. We can see what's going on debates in European Union. We can see what's going on in NATO. When our friends in Ukraine who are fighting for our freedom, for our democracy, waiting these weapons decisions. And we are just arguing and discussing. Estonia made quick decisions. We have helped already Ukraine, let's say, 1/3 annual defense budget, Estonian defense forces. We just made decisions this way. And we have to do, not discuss, we have to make decisions quickly, because Ukraine is waiting. Every single day in Ukraine will be killed hundreds of people. And what will be the future? If we are not acting us up, then we don't win that enemy. But we have to win. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It is a war that democracy has to win in the end. Frédéric.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Frédéric Bernard. I'm the head of cabinet of President Michel, more speaking of the perspective of the European Council. And to answer your question, I think as it was said by the first speaker, the leadership is maybe one of the most important things we have seen from the side of the Union. While NATO was struggling with this impossible situation of not being able to intervene or having chosen not to intervene, the Union has been showing quite leadership, I think, when it comes to sanctions, military supply, with even sometimes soft coordination between member states, which I think was for us a big lesson, that with a few coordinated actions you can do a lot. Then, of course, on sanctions, as you know, we have adopted on Monday the 6th packet of sanctions with a huge decision on oil that I think will have also real important consequences on the conflict. So, and when you see on defense inside member states, the shift we are seeing is huge. We mentioned Finland and Sweden. Remember that Finland was not part of any bloc for decades, even in the Cold War, so that's a major shift. We saw Germany also shifting position. We just saw Denmark. So inside societies, we have great changes. Where I think the biggest consequence is attractiveness also of the Union. After Brexit, we had a phase where the Union, you might have had a question, and then you had Brexit. And this war shows with countries wanting to join the Union being seen also as a kind of protective European Union that also protecting citizens, I think is also a quite an important factor. I think also on values that was raised by many leaders. I think we have seen with Putin what autocrats do. And I think it's a good lesson within the Union, because we have seen some tendencies or regime taking this path, and I think that's also playing inside the Union. And you see also in different elections in France or in other places what the connection with Putin has a big price, which I believe is quite good. And not to be too long, I think we have no great challenges. We mentioned climate change, but we are in a situation where inflation is really high. We have food prices increase, scarcity is looming. We have also the prices of energy very high. So the next challenge will be I'm not talking about Ukraine, I'm just focusing on the question within the Union. Big challenges would be public finance and social cohesion. And there I think we have to be really careful, because keeping the Union, keeping the unity we have kept so far will be a great challenge. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, of course, Benedetto.
Oh, thank you. Let me say, first of all, that the war of aggression of Mr. Putin's war of aggression against our Ukrainian friends has been a very strong wake-up call for the European Union. Let me say also that, of course, it was possible to be faster and stronger, but so far the reaction of the European Union has been very strong, and for the first time European Union acted as a global player during an international crisis. We provide humanitarian and financial aid to our friends in Kiev. We set up 6 packages of sanctions. Despite the efforts of Mr. Orban, it was possible to adopt also the last one. And sanctions are there to function. My Prime Minister, Mr. Draghi, said a couple of days ago that we will see in the summer the real impact of the sanctions on Moscow. And we was ready to provide weapons to Ukrainian leadership, to President Zelensky, to defend their people, their territory, and we have to keep on to provide also weapons in order to put Mr. Putin in the position to accept to open a sincere negotiation. We did it because at stake it was first of all the life of the Ukrainians, the institutions of Ukraine, but at stake was the values that we share, I mean freedom, democracy, and the rule of law. And probably the aggression of Mr. Putin was, of course, for the territory, for the ideology, but was because he can't stand a neighbor looking at EU values and developing a democracy. It was impossible. At the same time, Mr. Putin reoccupied, at the end of the day, we can say, he reoccupied Belarus. Well, everything is okay? No, we have to understand the lesson that it's coming from the crisis in Ukraine, and we need, as European Union, first of all, to change the mechanisms of decision when it comes to international and foreign policy. We have to overcome the unanimity rule. That means a veto power for instance, a good friend of Mr. Putin in this case. We have to set up a common defense system at the EU level, and I'm proud that my Più Europa submitted a resolution with other ALDE parties to push the ALDE leadership in order to push in the EU institution to have an upscale of the common defense system, not to be an alternative to NATO, of course, but to be a partner of US in the NATO, because we have to keep in mind that now things are going more or less in the right way, and we have Mr. Biden at the White House. It's difficult to understand what would happen if Mr. Trump was still there during the crisis. So we have to keep in mind that we have to be stronger in order to make decisions, but also in order to have a common defense system. One other point, just to be brief, is about refugees. The reaction about the millions of refugees coming in Europe from Ukraine was great, because we open the way to the 55 how you can say, directive that opened the way to EU reaction on refugees. And I think and I hope that this will be the first step in order to change the system, to overcome the Dublin mechanism and rules. Now the threats are coming from the eastern flank of the European Union, but we have to keep in mind that threats may come in the future from the south, from the Mediterranean Sea. Last point, enlargement. I agree. We have to regenerate the enlargement process. My government is keeping the point on enlargement to the Western Balkans, but also to put on the pipeline Moldova and Georgia, and first of all, Ukraine. I'm proud to say that Mr. Draghi, at the last informal European Council, was the leader of the few member states saying that at the European Council at the end of June, we have to give the green light to the candidature status to Ukrainian. We have to understand that EU is more important than it was, and it's visible to the public opinion in Europe. Public opinion in Europe now wants reactions and solutions at the EU level to feel safer and stronger. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I do have a second round of questions for you, which are personalized questions. I believe they're excellent questions as well. If you do not like them, I didn't make them myself. They're part of the whole concept, and they told me, you know, stick to the questions, stick to your notes, opening notes, and so on. Time is important as well. But they actually touch upon certain things that you've already mentioned. So maybe we change the order a bit, and I would start with Frédéric. We've had this unprecedented step because of the war in Ukraine, and we have used the European Peace Facility to deliver weapons there. Do you think it is a one-off, or do you think that it will be used again?
I think if you look at the background of what has happened, and I remember when we had on the 24th the invasion, the weekend right after, you had a European Council the same day, and on the Saturday morning we called a few member states to see what can be put in place to provide military supply to Ukraine, and rapidly you had leaders agreeing and changing long-standing policies. It was amazing to see some being quite cautious. No, maybe a step too far, and slowly they changed with a bit of movement. And I think having the peace facility was extremely important for them to have also this EU umbrella. If the EU does it, then it's fair to do it. And so this is why we have launched this with High Representative, went quite smoothly, fast, even with neutral member states that sometimes for constitutional reasons have more difficulties. And I think now we are in the fourth tranche, so the first one, 500 million, and then we multiply. And the appetite is there because there is a need. And I think when we respond to the need, it will continue. I don't think we will have this for the sake of having it or because we want it. I think we need to be careful and to act in complementarity with NATO. That's sure for everyone. But I think it will go on as long as the necessity is there, and that's the track we are on. Yes, thank you.
Thank you as well. I'm moving to Kalle. Estonia is in a particular sensitive spot on the map of Europe. How would you like to see the EU developing basically its defense and military dimension in order to increase security of your country, of the Baltic states, and the EU Eastern members more broadly?
Thank you. This is a very important question. Maybe I am starting with Ukraine, because when Ukraine will be as a candidate country for the European Union, it gives also more security or umbrella to Baltic states and also to Estonia. And second thing what I would like to add, that European Peace Facility Fund is so important also for Estonia, because all these stockpiles, our weapons and ammunition that we have given to Ukrainians who are fighting for the European values, we have to change them, and this is so important. And as we saw also last year, all these hybrid attacks against Lithuanian, Latvian, and Polish borders. That means that also European Union can do more on that field, because as we know that Russia would like to use migration as a weapon. And this is one of the possibilities also. And I think one of the future problems will be also cybersecurity, because more and more our public services will be on the cyberspace, and that means that we have to protect all these services, infrastructure, and etc., etc. Next thing, military mobility. Why military mobility is so important for Estonia? Because it's the only way to move troops from one part of Europe to our side, because we are in the corner of the European Union and NATO. Very important thing. And I believe that European Union have great possibilities on the field of new technologies. We have to be leaders on that field also, and space. These are the cornerstones what I would like to add, and I believe we have great possibilities to do more in European Union together. But I am coming back to the quick decisions, because this time is so turbulent for all of us, and that means that we have to make quick decisions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving to Michal now. Poland is traditionally relying on the US and NATO for security guarantees, with a risk that a Trump-like politician, or Trump again, God forbid, but who knows, might become the president of the US again. How would Poland like to see the EU defense and security capabilities developing?
Well, that's a tricky question, obviously, about Trump. I was listening.
You got the Trump question.
Yeah, this is a Trump question. It has to be a Trump question everywhere. Look, we were listening to our American friends this morning who are present at the Congress from the IRA, the Republican Institute, and they said they promised that Trump 24 will not happen. So let's hope so, but it's still not impossible, obviously. I would be probably one of the last persons to defend Mr. Trump, but you also, to be frank and fair, you have to remember that his words were not exactly the same as what he was doing when he was the president of the United States, because we do remember on our eastern flank that Mr. Trump was not withdrawing American forces either from Germany or from our part of the continent. So that he was, as usual, that was not consistent with what he was declaring. But you know, we have to remember this. Today, we have the unprecedented number of US soldiers on the Polish soil. Before the war, we had between 4,000 and 5,000. There are almost 12,000 now. And it's good to have them, obviously, on board with us. But Europe as a continent cannot rely on American protection forever. We have to be aware of that obviously America should be here, should stay in Europe, should not turn its attention to Asia solely. We are so close with our American friends, and I believe whoever becomes the next president of the United States will not order removing armed forces of the United States from the continent, especially now, after what we have experienced with Mr. Putin and what we know about the Russian appetite for aggression, to grabbing the land, to eliminating not only the countries, but also the nations, as the Ukrainian nation. So America is fully aware of what's going on here. But coming back to my first sentence, we cannot rely on them forever. We need to do a lot more to think about our own security, our own protection, to think about our future here. And absolutely, I do agree with what Mr. Minister said. We need quicker decisions, quicker political decisions, but also quicker or shorter time to execute military orders between our nations, between our countries. It's such a complicated bureaucratic procedure right now. I'm talking to the number of Polish generals, and moving, again, mobility, moving forces from one country to another on our continent. This is a nightmare, bureaucratic nightmare. So we need to do a lot more to improve our interoperability, our ability to move easily forces from one place to another, and to be ready for any kind of aggression, because we already know that we have to be ready for the aggression. Obviously, when you look at what happened specifically, you have to remember about the European defense, and specifically the missile defense or air defense, and thinking and working on the joint projects to start securing our airspace should be one of the key topics. This is one of the lessons that we have to learn from the Ukrainian war. We do not have the systems right now, and I'm not surprised that Mr. Minister would like to add to that. Thank you.
Yes, please.
I just wanted to add a small remark that we are talking about quicker actions, more cooperation, and et cetera. Just example, last Friday, 3 defense ministers, Estonian, Latvian, and Lithuanian, signed a communique about how to move quickly defense forces from one country to the other country. If, for example...
Among your three.
Yes, absolutely, among our 3. And that will be international agreement, of course, so you have to ratify that in our parliament, but we started that process. It's historically first time in our part of Europe, in Baltic states.
Thank you very much, Guri. Complicated to be a woman in defense in times of war, I imagine. So this is an easy question. Finland and Sweden have decided to apply to NATO. How do you think this will actually influence the security of Northern Europe, in particular Northern Europe?
Well, I think, as many of the previous speakers have emphasized, this is a time where we need more collaboration, more unity in Europe, and this is one step that will make that possible, I think. And of course, almost everyone in Norway is very happy that Sweden and Finland is applying for NATO membership. I think it's quite obvious that it will increase security in our part of Europe, but I think it will also be very good for Europe as a whole, because this means that we are strengthening the alliance, and I think that is good for the entire Europe. And it's also it's important that we don't divide sort of Europe and NATO into different fractions, but still, I think it's a good thing that countries that have similar interests and countries that countries collaborate more on procurement, investments, strategic choices, which means that we complement each other in a better way than we do today. Because our challenge is that if you compare Europe to Russia, our military strength is much greater than Russia's. But we have problems coordinating And that makes us weaker than we have to be. So I think that everything that makes European countries that have similar interests collaborate more is a very good thing for the whole continent. So I think it's a very good thing for Northern Europe, or for the whole of NATO and for the EU, that Sweden and Finland has made this decision. And then, of course, it's our hope as a Liberal Party in Norway that this could also help trigger the debate about membership in the EU in Norway, because it's quite compelling to see that both Sweden and Finland, and also Denmark, they're all taking these very important choices in a very short time span about their security policy. And they're all seeing that they need to be more integrated with other countries, that they need stronger alliances than they have before. But in Norway, there's very little debate on this. We're sort of leaning everything on NATO and not talking about EU. And I think, as many of you have said, in order to be resilient, we need more alliances. And I think it would be very positive for Norway to be even more integrated in the security and defense policy in the EU, either as a full member, but if not, being more integrated also in that part of the EU. So that's something that we are fighting for in Norway, to lift the debate of us being more integrated into that part of European policy.
Just a very short follow-up question. Yes, after a round of applause. Was it surprising to hear that they're joining, or it came as a natural response to the crisis?
Well, I think it was surprising, because the foreign policy in especially Sweden, but also in Finland, has been so steady for so long, and also the people have been very skeptical against going into NATO, especially in Sweden, where neutrality has been a very important value in their foreign policy. So that the shift was so big in such a short amount of time, that was surprising. But then it's been sort of a joke between our countries that Sweden and Finland were as much a member of NATO as Norway has been a member of EU. So we're sort of members, but not really members. So even though the step in one way was very big, it was also very small. Well, I hope that can happen in Norway as well.
Second follow-up answer.
My question is that what these decisions showed to us, Finland and Sweden would like to join to NATO. It showed that Russia doesn't change. Russia don't change. And we have to remember that.
Last question of our debate, because there are other coming as well. He got the Trump question, you're getting the migration question. Italy and Southern Europe suffered a migration and refugee crisis, of course, in 2015. And the EU more or less failed to approve the common migration policy back then. Do you think that the Ukrainian refugee inflow in 2022 now provides a new momentum for a EU common policy on migration?
Well, I hope and I think yes, that the answer is yes. I think that also our friends in the north and the eastern border of EU realize that when a huge amount of people are coming, you need the help of other member states. You can manage by yourself, even if you are a big country as Italy is, because people are arriving, but they are not arriving in Sicily or in Italy. Many of them want to remain, most of them want to go elsewhere, and it's quite difficult, to be euphemistic, to take them as prisoners. They are human beings and they have their preferences, they want to go elsewhere. But again, I think that we did great as EU in order to provide assistance to the Ukrainian refugees. In Italy, we are, of course, Poland. In Poland, the Polish people did a great job, first of all, because millions of people arrived there. In Italy, we are hosting 150,000, more or less, refugees that came in the last weeks and months. But again, we have to think to the future. I hope that the refugee flow from Ukraine will stop and people will be ready to go back to their homes and houses. But we have to think about an EU system for managing the migrant flows in the future, probably from Asia and from Africa. Demography is there, geography will remain the same, and we need a common system. It's not an Italian problem, believe me, but we have to manage at the EU level to transform a threat in an opportunity, because we need workers, we need people to work in our houses, farms, and we have to manage. We have to set up regular flows on year by year with blue card, people that can come. So you can, let me say that you can manage, you can ask to the leadership in Africa, for instance. If you ask to the leadership in Africa, stop people leave your country, it doesn't work if you do not get them something back. If you say, okay, we have to stop this mess, now people starting that are leaving from your country, okay, they can. We can manage, we can decide the more or less the total amount of people that will be allowed to come to look for a job in Europe. We can provide them assistance. They can come in a safe way, not through the human being traffickers, and so on. So I hope that after this crisis, we will have a better and united defense system, but also an EU new system to manage migration flows.
Thank you very much. And I know precisely what you mean, because I was part of the team closing the negotiations for the blue card after such a long time, and still after such a long time, it is not ambitious enough. It has to be more ambitious than that. Thank you, and a big hand of applause for our distinguished guests today.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I will kindly ask you to stay on the stage, because before you leave, I'm inviting a very dear person and also a long-standing inspirational model for me in politics called Guy Verhofstadt. Please, Guy.
Hello.
Hello.
So I come to present you something?
Yes, absolutely. I have no idea what it is all about, but whatever you say, it turns out great, so the floor is yours.
Yeah. Well, everybody is talking about Ukraine, but the question is what we are doing about Ukraine. Our governments are doing, the European Union is doing, not enough in my opinion, but okay, that's another discussion. I will not enter in that discussion this afternoon. But what we are, liberals, Democrats and centrists are doing. And I was very impressed, maybe you have seen it, by what Lithuania has done. Lithuania has done crowdfunding, and this crowdfunding has collected, at this moment, 29 million. Pure crowdfunding and the citizens. And I thought if the Lithuanians are capable to do that, we as liberal and Democrats are also capable to do that. So what we launched today with Renew is a crowdfunding. Maybe it can be showed. No, it's not that I want. It's the previous. No, the previous. Again, this one. Yeah. So a crowdfunding that we will organize together with an organization, Promote Ukraine. That's a Brussels-based non-profit organization. They have 8 years of experience. They are, in fact, an alliance of Ukrainian organizations, Euromaidan on the one hand, and the Center for Civil Liberties. And maybe you can go to the next one. Inspired on that Lithuanian experience. So that Lithuania have followed that. That one of the things was the drone. That the crowdfunding was sufficient for the drone. But they are now, like I said, at 28, 29. So we're going to do something similar. When you donate do a donation, you will also have the possibility to say what the money is needed for. So, because the money is not going naturally to offensive weapons, but the Ukrainian army and Ukraine needs also a lot of other things, especially optics, helmets, vehicles, bulletproof vests, drones, clothing, tactical medicine, and so on. And the specificity of this crowdfunding is that you self can decide on where your money is going, for what purpose, for what type of equipment. And we launched this today. We will ask not only that we on our social media are spreading this crowdfunding effort, but also on the social media of the parties. Più Europa, for example, Benedetto could be a good idea, and all others. So instead of only talking about Ukraine, I think it's good that the liberal, democratic and centrist forces in Europe are also doing something for Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the great discussion.